Shadow Slave. By Guiltythree. Chapter 1195, Battle of the Black Skull. The world had grown darker under the veil of tumultuous thunderclouds, and torrents of water fell from the skies, bending like whips. Illuminated by a blinding flash of lightning, two humans dashed away from the claws of a towering beast. Nephi's, now. There was no real need for words. Sunny and Nephi's might have grown distant as of late due to the choices they had made, but the core of their relationship was the same. They were battle partners first, and everything else second. That bond had been forged in fire, tears, and blood on the forgotten shore long before a shadow was cast on it by other matters. By now, their ability to act with seamless coordination was even higher than the unnatural unity granted to the warriors of valor by the forged swords. From the moment that the two of them had killed that first carapace scavenger together, Sunny and Nephi's went through countless battles together. She had taught him how to wield the sword, while he taught her how to control her soul essence as a master. Despite everything, that bond would never change. Which was not to say that there was no other bond between them. The moment Direfang lunged forward, Sunny dashed to the right, while Nephi's dashed to the left. At the same time, some of her radiance mixed with his shadows, while one of his shadows wrapped itself around her body. The sum of their powers was greater than its parts. The shadows and the brilliant light seemed to resonate with each other, making both of them stronger than they had any right to be. Sunny turned into a silhouette shrouded in broiling darkness, while Neph's radiance took on a darker hue. The darkness was permeated with blinding white light, while the light seemed to contain wisps of inexhaustible darkness. The light made the darkness deeper, while the darkness made the light much more stark and radiant. And there was more to it, too. At least for Sunny. Unlike his shadows, which augmented all his physical attributes, Neph's flames ignited the soul, too. Wreathed in her fire, he could feel his essence become much more vibrant and warm. Much more potent. Ah. What a nice feeling. Nephi's must have been using her full augmentation, and with the addition of Sunny's shadow, she was just fast enough to evade Direfang's claws. He, on the other hand, was just a little bit slower. Luckily, the Saint had chosen Changing Star as the primary target. Since he couldn't attack both of them at the same time effectively, the strike directed at Sunny was not as inescapable as it could have been. Sunny felt a slight sense of dissatisfaction. So, what, we are back to that. Neph is the bait, while I am the blade. He didn't like it one bit. In any case, Direfang had made a mistake. A very serious mistake. He shouldn't have paid less attention to Sunny. Because while his soul was aflame with Neph's radiance, a few of his abilities received a transformative boost, as well. Not the least because he could spend his essence more freely. Get ready, bastard. Nephi's landed from her dodge and instantly pivoted, barely avoiding the beast's follow-up strike and slashing at his arm with her incandescent sword. At the same time, Sunny allowed himself to be buried under a wave of shadows. What emerged from them, however, was not a human but a four-armed fiend clad in a suit of fearsome onyx armor. The creature was like a spawn of darkness, but its eyes burned with furious white radiance, and its mouth was like an incinerating furnace of white flame. The two of them had created distance between each other, and so, Direfang could only face one at a time. That was why he was a fraction of a moment too late to react to Sunny's attack. Faster. 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 The ground split and exploded under his clawed foot as Sunny pushed himself forward. The air, which was usually soft and unnoticeable, was suddenly like a wall. He broke through that wall. The drops of rain seemed to freeze in place as they fell. Sunny wanted to let out a scream, a roar, a battle cry. But he didn't, of course. 1.1 Why would he announce his strike while attacking the enemy from behind? The sin of Solace fell silently. But Direfang's was suddenly not in the place he had been a split second before. The towering beast had twisted, somehow, to avoid the transcendent blade, too swift to be seen. Sunny only felt the air being displaced by the Saint's massive body a heartbeat later. That was fine, too. He fell down, crouching on his four hands, and felt something tear through the empty space above. In the next moment, there was a blinding flash, and an angry growl. Direfang might have been able to avoid Sunny's attempt at backstabbing him, but by doing so, he was forced to turn his back on Nephi's. And Nephi's, without wasting a single moment, used this chance to plunge her incandescent sword into the beast's hide. The towering creature disengaged and stopped for a moment, looking down. There, on its flank, a long wound could be seen through singed fur. Drops of blood were rolling down his side as they boiled. The laceration was shallow, and not at all serious. However, Direfang had received a wound, no matter how small, while Sunny and Nephi's had not. His bestial face contorted into a vicious snarl. The saint did not say anything before launching into another attack. There was no need for words, and none of them had anything to say. Their swords, claws, and aspects would be doing the talking. A spirit of flame, a spawn of shadows, and a savage beast clashed in the middle of a terrifying battlefield. They were moving so fast that it was hard to see what was happening. Flowers of white fire bloomed in the middle of a pouring rain, and the ground shook from the fury of their murderous clash. Their battle was frenzied and turned everything around them into pure havoc, but it wasn't senseless. In fact, each of the three remained chillingly cold-blooded and calculating in the midst of the furious confrontation. Even while augmenting each other, Sunny and Nephi's were much slower and weaker than the Saint of Clan Song. But not to the degree where he could instantly annihilate them. More importantly than that, there were two of them. Even if they were not Direfang's equals in terms of raw power, they could use their knowledge and understanding of each other to make up for the gap in strength. And so, the battle raged on. Scores of strikes were exchanged in the span of a dozen seconds. The ground was broken and upturned. The rainwater mixed with the soil, turning it into mud. The mud was incinerated by the flames, turning into ash. For a few short moments, a fragile equilibrium seemed to have been created between the two masters and the saint. Astonishingly, Sunny and Nephi's had not been ripped to pieces by Direfang, like a couple of Ascended should have been. They even managed to push him back. But Sunny was not very happy about the result. It was because he knew that this equilibrium would not last long. Right now, even while fighting at the absolute limit of their capabilities, both sides were carefully studying their adversary. The side that managed to glean the enemy's strengths and weaknesses first was going to win, while the side that failed was going to be killed. Well, how wonderful, in that regard, Sunny had an overwhelming advantage. As a practitioner of shadow dance, he was unrivaled when it came to learning everything about his enemies, be they humans, nightmare creatures, or saints. Chapter 1196, Battle of the Black Skull 10. In the cacophony of the battle, obscured by roaring thunderclaps and the whisper of falling rain, two swords were creating a lethal melody of steel. Mordred knew that he was weaker than his younger sister. He was slower, too, and not nearly as resilient. He was even less skilled, perhaps. His powers were formidable, but they were useless against her. The King of Swords had made sure of that. His soul cores had been spent on creating the reflections, and those reflections were being spent on holding back her army. That army was also more powerful than the one on his side. Morgan had chosen the battlefield and lured the enemy into a trap. As a general, she had already succeeded. But she was not only a cunning strategist. She was a brilliant warrior, too. Morgan was like an unstoppable blade. She had everything that a princess of war was supposed to possess. She had power, talent, resolve, intelligence. She had the authority of their family, and its favor as well. While Mordred had nothing. He had always had nothing. And everything he had tried to make his was either destroyed or taken away. However, despite all that, he was not going to lose. He was going to win. Die, you wretched thing. Their swords clashed, and even though Mordred had managed to read her intentions, he was still thrown back. His block was perfect, but it was not strong enough. He slid in the mud and let out a pained gasp. He was slightly dazed. Rain was falling all around them like a gray wall, and every drop was a mirror. The world was reflected on itself myriads of times, and all those reflected worlds flooded his mind like a kaleidoscope of horror. Every gruesome death, every desperate call for help, every selfless act of courage, every cowardly wail of defeat were reflected, multiplied, and projected into his head. It helped him to orient himself better on the chaotic battlefield, but it was also annoying. This was why he didn't like rain. Morgan was already closing in. Mordred grinned as he rose to face her. There she was. A beautiful young woman in a suit of black armor, who looked so much like him. What did she know? She didn't know anything. She had been a mere child when their family decided to betray him. Not even a sleeper. She had not been there when his original body was destroyed, or when he was locked in a cage like a beast. And Morgan was not among those he wanted to kill the most. But she was their symbol. For Mordred, the young woman with a face that was eerily similar to his own symbolized the great clan valor. She embodied everything that he wanted to destroy. And so, he was going to break her into pieces. Her sword flashed, cleanly cutting through the raindrops as it flew toward his body. He tried to deflect it, but it was of no use. The strike turned out to be a feint. A moment later, sharp pain pierced the left side of his face. Mordred stumbled back, feeling blood flow down his cheek. Arg. I think I lost an eye, this time. Illuminated by the flash of lightning, Morgan's face remained impassive. Pathetic. Did her voice sound disappointed? Mordred smiled and raised his sword without saying anything. Usually, this would be the time to implement a scheme. A cunning trick, a subtle deception, an unexpected reversal. Something like that. He was a master of such things, after all. But he was sincere when he said that there would be no tricks today. There was no point in destroying the symbol of valor with a trick. There would be no satisfaction, either. His hatred would not be quenched. No. He was going to defeat her with nothing except his own body and blade. Because, even after they had discarded him, Mordred was still stronger, strong enough to destroy them all. And they needed to learn that. Come, sister. Give it your all. His laughter drowned in the rain. Morgan obliged. For a few seconds, the two of them clashed, their swords singing a sharp and deadly song. The clangor of two blades striking against each other fused into one continuous, sonorous melody. They were too fast, too skilled. Neither could overpower the other, and those who got in their way could only flee and stare in terror and awe. But eventually, inevitably, Morgan obliterated his defenses. Her sword broke through his armor, impaling him through the chest. If it was anyone else, their heart would have been pierced. Oh, but he must have shaken her a fair bit. Enough for her to forget that her brother had been born with a rare condition that caused the position of one's organs to be reversed. So, she missed his heart. Still, having a sword driven through your lung hurt a lot. It hurt terribly. Not that he cared. Instead of recoiling from the strike, Mordred pushed forward and grabbed Morgan by the neck. Her eyes widened, and she hurriedly tried to twist the sword in the wound. Her other arm was already moving to block the potential strike of his own sword. Instead of trying to use it, Mordred simply headbutted her and felt her nose crack under the force of the unexpected blow. Morgan staggered back. Blood was flowing from her broken nose, painting the lower part of her face red. You vile scum. Her sword, which was still lodged in his chest, scattered into a whirlwind of scarlet sparks. He couldn't help but stagger and let out a pained yelp. She was, without a doubt, going to summon it back. But that would take a few seconds, at least. Not caring, Morgan lunged forward. Her leg whipped into the air, aiming to take his head clean off. Mordred blocked it with his sword, and felt his sword crack. His sword broke. There was more pain. Morgan's shin cut through his sword, his armor, and his forearm. The bone broke, the muscle split, and the tendons tore. His bleeding hand fell to the ground. Not paying it any attention, Mordred stepped forward and drove his broken sword into the narrow crack between her breastplate and the segmented steel skirt protecting her lower waist. The jagged blade plunged into his sister's side. Even though her flesh seemed as durable as steel, he pushed it as deep as he could before the broken memory disintegrated into a rain of sparks. She let out a stifled groan and pushed herself away. I'll kill you. She tried to hide it, but there was a hint of hesitation in her voice. Morgan was winning. She was definitely winning. She had only received one serious wound, while her enemy already looked half dead. He looked like a walking corpse. So why? Why was he so calm? What was wrong with him? She felt a chill run down her spine. Her sword was already manifesting itself back into reality. Mordred was summoning a new weapon, as well. He glanced down at his severed hand, and stepped over it indifferently. No. You won't. there was a hint of finality to his words. Gritting her teeth, Morgan blocked out the pain and attacked once again.